We're all good? Okay, so I'm going to get started now. Again, my name is Theo Thompson. Good to be here. Nice to meet you all. Thanks for being here today and for staying with us. As you can see up on the screen is my bio. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that because it's been up there for a while. And I'm going to talk about medical device reporting and complaint handling. Today I'll cover complaint handling, MDR reporting, some investigations, trendings, and then takeaways from an FDA warning letter. So we'll start with a real scenario based on real events. You work at a company named Hearts of Fire Pacemakers, and you're at a wedding reception in Wisconsin. You just finished the chicken dance with a new friend you met at the wedding who goes by the name of Millie. You sit down and Millie complains about some discomfort that she's having with her pacemaker. So based on this information, do you get Millie a spotted cow and explain that it may help with the discomfort she's experiencing? Do you take down Millie's information and let her know that you work at Hearts of Fire and are going to report this via the complaint handling process? Or do you start examining her pacemaker right then and there at the wedding reception? So any show of hands, who thinks it's A? Is A a good response? A? A is a preference. We got one taker for A. How many think it's B? B? Yep, B. And then finally the last one, C. Would it be proper to start examining her pacemaker? No. Do we have the poll results?
Yeah, 94% said B.
Who? What was the other? One person said?
Yeah, it doesn't. It shows 0 for the other two. So
Oh, interesting.
apparently.
Yes, the correct answer, of course, is B. And as I was reading through these, I was just thinking, too, A has two other issues with it, potential issues. One, it could be the unlicensed practice of medicine because you're getting her a spotted cow for her symptoms. And it also has some a promotion of off-label use of spotted cow. There's some implicit claim there that it could relieve her chest pain. So A, I don't know. It's a risky one. Okay. So this is what we're talking about, complaint handling. A manufacturer becomes aware when any employee has acquired information that reasonably suggests a reportable adverse event has happened. And of course, adverse events may result from a device failure, malfunction, improper or inadequate design of the device, could result in manufacturing errors, an error in labeling, or of course, user error. Everyone's favorite catch-all. Just some sources of complaints. Of course, it could come directly from physicians or the patients themselves who have the devices. It could come from literature, which includes scientific articles or just general mass media, such as newspapers. Social media, you need to track what people are talking about or saying on social media about your devices, because those could be sources of complaints. It could, of course, come from return product that you receive. And another thing to keep in mind is that complaints are international in scope. So the FDA wants you to report or at least consider complaints on devices that happen outside the US if it occurred on a similar device which you have clearance or approval for in the US. It could be the same or a similar device. All right, another scenario for you all. You may remember this fellow. You do your duty and report Millie's complaint to the Hearts of Fire's complaint handling group. The group investigates the complaint by reaching out to Millie's physician, who refers to himself as Dr. Slim Goodbody, FACP. The surgeon remembers this implant well, and he provides some information on it. He says that this was one of his first patients. His technique wasn't up to par at the time, and he wanted to use some crazy glue during the implant to really make sure that the pacemaker stayed in the pocket. He thought that was very important. He knows that it's been causing her problems for years, and he also recognizes the fact that she'll be coming in for a revision soon. So with that information, should Hearts of Fire now report the complaint, because FDA needs to know what is occurring in Dr. Goodbody's surgeries? Would they report the complaint as a user error? Or C, would they keep the complaint record but not report it to FDA as an adverse event? How many think it would be A? Any takers? Perhaps A. How about B? Would you report this as a user error? 1, 2, maybe. Or C, keep the complaint record but not report it to FDA as an adverse event. How many think it's C? Anyone? What did the online viewers say?
We got a few responses, and it looks like everyone there said A.
Everyone would report A. Interesting. A is actually the wrong answer. And it's wrong. Well, we can keep going for the sake of the presentation, but the FDA doesn't regulate the practice of medicine, and that's essentially what A is talking to. So some people might be concerned about that, and they are rightfully concerned, but it's not the FDA. Reporting it as a user error, we can discuss user error more. I wouldn't report this as a user error necessarily. I wouldn't jump there first. User errors, the FDA has a couple regulations one regulation that's specifically on point, and that's 803.20. Manufacturers do not have to report an adverse event if they have information which would lead a person who is qualified to make a decision on the matter that the device did not cause or contribute to the reportable event, or that it was not a malfunction which would cause or contribute to death or serious injury if it were to recur. I think in this case, the way I kind of tried to draw the fact pattern, because the doctor admitted that it was due to, or he had used crazy glue, a person that reviews this, a medical person or person with medical knowledge might draw the conclusion that, well, the device isn't the cause of the pain here, it's likely crazy glue. Plus, at the time when he called Dr. Goodbody, he said he was planning a revision. He hadn't done a revision yet, so there hasn't been a serious injury associated with it. That's another thing to consider too. Also, the FDA guidance, 2016 guidance on device reporting speaks specifically to user error. So just the last bullet point is probably the most important. If you determine that an event is solely the result of user error with no other performance issue, and there has been no device-related death or serious injury, you are not required to submit the MDR. Something to keep in mind. And then, of course, I couldn't talk about adverse event reporting without talking about what constitutes a serious injury. Straight from the regulations, these are the elements. So to recap, in this case, I don't think it sounds like a serious injury has occurred. Now, the standard isn't whether or not the pain that she's experiencing is debilitating. I just threw that up there for shorthand, but at this rate, it doesn't look like there was a serious injury. There has been no revision performed yet, which we covered. And if there were a serious injury, there's a strong likelihood that it was due to Dr. Goodbody's practice, and therefore is not a user error, or excuse me, was a user error, but was not device related. All right, one more scenario. So Millie has her replacement procedure done, so now we have a revision surgery. And Dr. Goodbody does his job, and he sends the pacemaker back to HAP. They receive the pacemaker and conduct an investigation. However, they find that the pacemaker actually wasn't manufactured by Hearts of Fire, that it was competitors. So what should HAP's complaint handling group do now? Would you send the adverse event information to FDA with a cover letter stating that HAP did not manufacture the pacemaker? Would you do nothing because HAP didn't manufacture it? It's not their duty to do anything. Send it to Zips Pacemaker, the manufacturer of the device, so that they may investigate the complaint, or both, A and C. Well, what does the online poll say? Okay. How many think it would be A? B? Any takers? C? Or D? D. And online?
Online, we've got 9% for A. No one said B. About 73% for C, and 27% said A and C.
Yeah.
D.
A and C is actually the correct answer in this case. You have what now appears to be a reportable complaint because there's been a revision. The FDA there's a regulation on point in 803, which says that if you receive information, there's a little typo in this, but if you are a manufacturer or importer and you receive a complaint or have adverse event information, and you did not actually manufacture or import the device about which you have that information, then you must forward this information to the FDA with a cover letter stating that you did not manufacture or import the device in question. So this regulation is somewhat tricky because it says, when am I not required to report? That's actually the heading from the regulation. But within it, it tells you when you need to report. You just don't need to submit a 3500A. You submit a cover letter. And there is no requirement that you return the device to the manufacturer in this case. I don't think that's in the regulations. However, it's very often done. So let's talk briefly about investigations. FDA requires manufacturers to submit information that is reasonably known to them resulting from an investigation. So if you have the device on hand and you investigate it, you've already submitted the report for the adverse event because the reporting timeline is 30 days. That means that you have to submit a follow-up report with the results of that investigation. If the investigation is inconclusive or there's no information, you do not have to send a follow-up report. Just make sure that you're putting that information in the event file so that it's documented. This is the regulation on point speaking to supplemental reports. So if you do have additional information or you've received not just information from the investigation, but through also conducting follow-up, don't forget you have to submit that information to the FDA. No. Trending is a requirement of the regulations, but it's mentioned quite a bit in 803, but the requirement comes from 820, and it's written out at top that you shall establish and maintain procedures for analyzing processes, complaints, return product, and other sources of quality data. So that's where the requirement for trending comes from in the regs. And speaking to malfunctions, of course, the malfunctions are somewhat specific. If you have a device or similar device that you market would cause or contribute to a serious injury, that may necessitate a report. And then, of course, a malfunction is the failure of device to meet its performance specifications or otherwise perform as intended. The thing I want to highlight from this is that performance specifications include all claims made in the labeling of the device. So, of course, you want to limit your claims, your device advertising, to what's in the device labeling. But don't forget that there can be other claims which, through repetition, are sort of incorporated into the device claims that you need to consider. I don't know if you'd want to admit that you're off-label, but what I mean is if you're making claims in writing about the device, make sure that you're also considering those in your malfunctions and trending and tracking. So let's talk about some FDA warning letters now. There's one in particular from December of 2021. It was citing a manufacturer's trending and tracking of their serious adverse events and the risk severity. There were several takeaways from this. First one, the manufacturer was down classifying the risks that were associated with the device. The FDA saw that, and they didn't like it. The main point from the warning letter is that if you are down classifying, or even any classification that you put when trending device issues, make sure that it's well supported with a rationale and in written procedures. Otherwise, the FDA may give you a warning letter. In this warning letter in particular, one of the issues the FDA spotted was that the manufacturer was using the total number of devices shipped as a way to calculate the overall risk posed by the device. They thought that might downplay the risks. Another source of, or another reason why the manufacturer was downplaying the risks, because it overcounted the amount of devices which were out there. So if you are sort of basing your risk calculation on those, the number of devices shipped, make sure you have a rationale for it. Perhaps this wouldn't be as big a deal if the manufacturer could show that there's high turnover of these devices, so they're not sitting. In other words, it's not overcounting the number of devices that are in the field and undercounting the ones that are implanted, that there's a good rationale for using that number in your risk calculation. Another thing that the risk letter stated, or the warning letter, excuse me, that stated, in this case, the company did an investigation, but forgot to put the information from that investigation. The investigation in this case was inconclusive, but they didn't put that information that the investigation was inconclusive back in the complaint file. And the FDA found that and said there's no information to conclude that in the complaint file that justifies the malfunction would not be likely to cause or contribute to death or serious injury in the future. The takeaway there, of course, is close the loop. Make sure that that information goes back into the complaint file. Otherwise, the FDA will conclude that an MDR should have been submitted and find you at fault for it. So thank you. Are there any questions from the floor or online? No online? We have one in person.
For terms of complaints, is a lack of efficacy or lack of function considered one as well?
Yeah, I think it would, because it's not performing as intended.
So then you mentioned publications. So if a competitor published, our product worked better than their product, and their product failed in these cases, are those all reportables then?
I mean, it would certainly require you to investigate and then determine, I mean, you have to kind of relate the specific device to a specific event. But I wouldn't just take their conclusion as whole and report on that, no.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep, you're welcome. Anything else? All right. Thank you very much.